Okay, Nick Dutch again. Just a quick reply to the prayer doesn't work video. I find it interesting that you're using the phrase prayer doesn't work when you haven't actually quantified precisely what prayer is. You haven't precisely quantified or qualified what it works means. So therefore it is illogical and unintelligent to say prayer doesn't work. Now, if you say that, if you're going to be a superstitious person who understands that you are actually talking to God, and God is saying, yeah, okay, here's a pizza, you're mad. Completely fucking mad. If you see prayer in a useful light, namely as in the altered state of consciousness technique of the religious traditions of the Western world, you will realize that in that respect prayer does work, in the fact that if you do enough of it, you will develop an altered state of consciousness which you can control. But your video was about results, in which case you'd have to be able to work out what results are. As I mentioned in a previous video of mine, please obviously subscribe to my channel and go through my videos if you're interested in the debate. I say that if you use the phrase "it works," then you're being an arsehole, you're being fake. But you can start to work out what works and what doesn't work with time. And I believe I go into detail as to changes in the outside world and the fact that you can't actually correlate perfectly your ritual or your prayer and the results. But what you can do is look on the psychosomatic side of things and deliberately control aspects of your circulation, your heart beats, the action or non-action of certain organs. You can actually control your body to a certain extent through prayer and meditation. That's maybe it's psychosomatic, maybe it's psychological, but either way it works. In that respect it works. I would also say that prayer is an excellent coping mechanism which all atheists should dedicate themselves to, because the moment you start believing in, because obviously fake it till you make it is the analogy. If you don't believe in God, carry on praying until you do. And then if you're suffering emotionally, psychologically, or if you've got stress about some things, you can use prayer and meditation to give that to God, and in a humble, reverent state of mind, and then you can cope better. So as far as a coping mechanism is concerned, in that respect the power of prayer works. Okay? But you also had a go at holistic medicine, and I find that bizarre because you also haven't defined what holistic medicine is. If we were to talk about herbalism, then one of the examples that you gave, or something similar to one of the examples that you gave, does actually exist. You mentioned a holistic birth control pill. Well, I personally don't actually know about that, but I know that there is a herbal abortant which has been used successfully since the Middle Ages, which I would recommend that you would find a skilled or qualified herbalist or medical practitioner to be able to advise you with, and that is called a rue or herb of grace, and it is used to do abortions because that's what it does. It's a powerful drug. So if you're going to use the words holistic medicine, you got to know what you're talking about. And that's just a few quick thoughts on the subject. You can't poo-poo prayer. I mean, obviously, your example of this lady on CNN was hilarious. I mean, completely hilarious. Yeah, she should have actually put some criticism in that, but on the other hand, her audience will be primarily the superstitious breed of Christians who don't want their beliefs challenged, because they've got beliefs, and beliefs are mental illness and all the rest of it. Beliefs are things you should learn to be able to create and destroy at will and by reasoning, and by virtue of a rational outlook on life, and thinking and planning these things. So, yeah, I do challenge you when you say prayer doesn't work. Just like I challenge an occultist who says his ritual works. Just like I would challenge someone who puts a 1p coin in a wishing well, and then all of a sudden they get a new job sometime that month. It's a question of using words properly, really. It's a question of knowing what your audience knows and be able to explain things at their level. I would say that the vast majority of the audience of CNN do believe in prayer, unfortunately, and in the superstitious manner. I would say that the Christian monotheistic interpretation is a little too popular, and it is considered to be right to be on the side of Christ, despite the fact that a lot of people on the side of Christ are twisted. You can be, I'm perfectly happy with you being an atheist, because that means you can be critical. I'm not happy with you challenging ideas that you haven't researched or understood. I'm not happy with you misinterpreting the words you're using, or indeed not knowing the meanings of the word you're using, or indeed exaggerating for effect, or indeed being deliberately antagonistic, because these things aren't quite necessary. Yes, the American population does have to learn how to think. The fact of the matter is they're not taught thinking in school. The British population needs to be taught how to think. They aren't taught how to think in school. They aren't taught how to think in university. Some of these things you got to learn or by your little self. And most people don't, because they're much happier being superstitious believers. Something's got to be done.